Castlegar SuperValue has been serving the area for over 30 years and is proud to sponsor Kootenay Kitchen. SuperValue, where your satisfaction is our main concern.
Hi, and welcome back to Kootenay Kitchen. After our sort of a strange procession into Halloween and all its oddities, we're going to go back to the strange world of different pizzas. Today we're going to do something that is more like a pizza sandwich than a pizza. It's a regular pizza, but it has a lid on it. Now there's an advantage to this in that you can put a whole lot more stuff in the middle than you can on a normal pizza. And it's very quickly made from scratch, probably quicker than home delivery even if you think about it hard. So we're going to start by getting our crust together. Now, for the crust, of course, you have to use warm water because the pizza dough is a yeast-based dough. So we're starting with 1 1/4 cups of warm water right from your kitchen tap. Go a little bit hotter. The warmth of water for yeast, of course, is baby bottle temperature. You can go a little bit warmer because you're going to lose some of the heat to the cup, and then following that, you're going to lose a little bit of heat to the bowl. So if you start with just a little bit too hot, by the time you get it over and get it in your bowl, it's going to be about baby bottle warm, which is a good temperature to keep the yeast alive and well and kicking. Okay, now like always, I put in just a touch of sugar to feed the yeast, which will make it a little more active a little more quickly. And then 1 package or 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast, which of course just stuck to my wet hand. Give it a little bit of a stir. Set it aside and ignore it while you start to prepare the rest of the pizza. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to use a can of plain tomato sauce. And this is, again, not a pizza sauce or anything, just a plain tomato sauce as your base. So we'll put that there. Now we're going to have to prepare all our vegetables and our cheeses and whatnot, so we can do that while we find out if our yeast is alive. And possibly something else we should do at this point is preheat our oven to 425 degrees. Okay, in this pizza we're going to put an onion, if we can catch it. Give me a stick, I'll kill it. So once again, peel the onion the easy way. You're going to lose a layer of onion, but you're going to save a lot of aggravation. Slice it fairly thinly because the only cooking that the onion's going to get, of course, is in the oven. So the thinner it is, the better it's going to cook. Little thin slices of onion. Okay, now one thing about making a pizza at home is you've got all kinds of options as to what you're going to actually put in it. Onions are generally on hand in the house here. I've always got canned mushroom stems and pieces, which are fine. If fresh mushrooms are on sale and I happen to have them in the fridge, I'll throw those on. If there's a green pepper in the fridge, I'll put that in. Just depends on what's kicking around. You can put anything on a pizza you want. For people that like pineapple on their pizza, and I have to say I never heard of pineapple on a pizza until I came west, and I found the whole idea thoroughly disgusting, and I'll never do that. You can always keep a can of pineapple on your shelf, drain it, put it on your pizza. Garlic sausage, which can be kept in the freezer, throw it in the microwave, nuke it for a couple of seconds to make it playful again, and you can slice that up. So all this stuff can just be on the shelf, so you can actually walk to your cupboard, your freezer, your fridge, put a pizza together at any time without worrying about where the ingredients are going to come from, because it's all stuff that can just be kept on hand. So for this one we're going to go with the onions, the garlic sausage, cheeses. Now if you don't use mozzarella cheese a lot, it also can be kept in the freezer. Just buy a chunk, freezer wrap it, throw it in the freezer. When you want to make a pizza, you can do one of two things. You can either think to get it out of the freezer, or maybe 15 minutes ahead, and it'll be soft enough to grate. Or then again, you can nuke it for a few seconds till it's soft, but don't nuke it so far that it tries to melt. I've done that. It's not a pretty sight. Okay, so we've got garlic, we've got onion, And we'll open our can of mushrooms, which of course requires a can opener. Now of course you'll be draining your mushrooms, and like I say, if there are mushrooms on sale and you have them in the house, you have them in the house for some other reason, by all means use fresh mushrooms. So we'll drain these. Drain them really good. Wring them out. Don't leave any liquid in them at all. Okay, and while we're opening cans, we might as well open the tomato sauce. Give it a shake. Open that up. That's a 7.5 ounce can of all-purpose tomato sauce. I say no extra spices, no Italian seasoning, just tomato sauce. And the Parmesan cheese you will probably buy already grated. That's here. And that keeps in the fridge. I've always got Parmesan cheese in my fridge. It's a hard cheese. It keeps in the fridge for a long time. You don't need to worry about it. Mozzarella, which of course could go bad on you, like a cheddar or any other soft cheese, you can always keep in the freezer if you don't use it often enough to warrant having it around. And we're going to grate about 2 cups of mozzarella. Now this is that part of the grater. Okay, so you're going to get a shred about like that, which is what you want. And you can use as much or as little cheese as you want. I tend to go very heavy on the cheese. I like a lot of cheese on a pizza. And like I say, where you're going to put a lid on this one, you can stack a whole lot more goodies inside than you would on a regular pizza because it's held down. It's not going anywhere. So let's see how we're doing here. We'll go a little bit more than that. I like to go for about 2 cups of grated. And our yeasty beasties look like maybe they're alive, so we'll go back there as soon as I finish this. Looks good to me. Okay. And so now we have too much stuff on the counter in front of me. Look at this. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Okay. Our yeast is showing signs of life, which is good. So we have in here at this point 1 1/4 cups of warm water, sprinkle of sugar, half a teaspoon or so to feed the yeast, which makes it really lively like that, and 1 tablespoon or 1 package of active dry yeast, however you buy it. I tend to buy it in bulk because I use a lot of it. Now we need about 4 cups of flour to make the dough. So start with 2 cups. This is just an all-purpose flour. Add that to your bowl and add your salt at that point. You want to add your salt with your flour because salt affects the yeast, of course. And we want about a teaspoon of salt. And then we'll grab a big spoon that I've lost. There it is. And beat that until it's smooth. This incorporates the salt evenly without attacking the yeast in full force. And this is a dough where you can or cannot knead it if you want to or if you don't want to. If you're in a hurry, you don't bother. Just go ahead and make your crust. If you want it to sit for a while, you can just set it aside and knead it a little bit, let it rise while you're doing something else. So there's 2 cups in there now, and I'm going to measure out 2 more cups and add that a little bit at a time. So this is going to stiffen the dough up. So stir it in, and you'll notice the dough starts to leave the side of the bowl, which is what you want. You'll also develop a real good, strong right arm doing this, perhaps a left arm if you're left-handed. Stir more in. So anywhere from, say, 3.5 to 4 cups. Depends on your flour, depends on how accurately you measured your water. Depends on how your flour feels that day, that type of thing as to how it's going to work. Okay, this is fairly stiff. Depends on how greasy you want to get your hands when you put it in the pan, as to how sticky it's going to be. Okay, I can work with that. That's still a little sticky, but if I grease my hands well, it's not going to stick too badly. But just for the sake of doing it, I'm going to put a little bit more flour in it, make it just a little tiny bit less sticky. Just keep stirring and stirring and stirring until that's worked in. That takes the place of your kneading. So you don't actually have to turn it out on the counter and knead it. I mean, you can turn it out on the counter and knead it if you want to, but why bother if you don't have to? Okay. Now, we have dough. We have a pizza pan. Get rid of that. Grease your pizza pan with plain white shortening. I'm getting pushed off the end of my counter here by ingredients. Okay, grease it heavily. You don't want it to stick in any way. This is the standard 12-ounce size, 12-inch pizza pan. One that's commonly available if you go out to buy a pizza pan. Then you grease your hands just about as heavily as you greased your pizza pan. Pull this dough out of here now. Break it exactly in half. Easy for me to say. And once you've broken it exactly in half, you take the big half and you put it back in the bowl. Okay. Work this around. You see, this is still fairly soft, a little bit sticky, but that makes it fairly easy to work with. Just keep doing this. It won't stick to your fingers. Now, like I said, we could have let that dough rise for a bit, kneaded it and let it rise, or not even kneaded it, just covered it and let it rise, if that's more convenient, because it is a yeast dough. All depends on what kind of time you got, what kind of time frame you're working in. It isn't necessary. Work it around, make a rim. Always work from the center going out. Keep it fairly even. You don't want any holes in the bottom of this because it's going to carry quite a load. And that makes for dribbly pizza, which makes for a mess. Mind you, that could be fun. My dogs like it when I do that. Okay, so that's in there. That's a fairly thin crust. There's a bit of a rim. That rim all the way around so you can hold your fillings okay. Okay, now we do something about this mess on my hands. And the next thing we'll put on there is the can of tomato sauce that we just opened, that we shook. It's settled again because it's been sitting there for a while. So this is a 7.5-ounce can of tomato sauce. Put that on there. Grab another spoon. Spread that evenly. Of course, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't, if you just wanted to keep it on hand, buy a can of prepared pizza sauce and use that as well. But I find it just easy to do this because I always have tomato sauce on hand and I always have the appropriate herbs and spices on hand. So that's spread fairly evenly. Now, I put my onions here. You'll probably remember that from the other strange pizza we did a couple of weeks ago. I like my onions right in the sauce, but there's no reason why they have to be there. They could be on top of the cheese. Spread them out. This is the advantage of slicing them very, very thinly. They'll cook well. They'll make lots. That was, as you noticed, about a medium-sized onion. You can go with less onion, more onion. This is one of those recipes where you can pretty well do what you want as far as quantity is concerned. Okay, onions in there. Now, the pizza type spices. We're going to put in some basil. And then again, we're using a dried herb, so we're going to crush it to release some of the oil that we hope is still in there. Sprinkle that over evenly. There's probably, half a teaspoon of basil. Same amount of oregano, which of course is the other popular Italian spice. Crush that. Sprinkle that in there. Then again, the spices are something you can vary to your taste too. If you like a really strong flavor, use more. If you don't, use less. Or use prepared pizza sauce. No surprises. And garlic powder. Can't have pizza without garlic. There again, quantity is up to you. I like about a half a teaspoon of each. Some people might want to go a whole lot lighter on the garlic, especially since it is powder, not garlic salt. Garlic salt's perfectly acceptable. Anything that's garlic flavored. And then we're going to put, because it's got a tomato base, we're going to put about a half a teaspoon of sugar. I don't cook tomatoes without sugar. I'm one of those. A little bit of sugar, just to take the acidity out of the tomatoes. Okay, so we have our crust, our sauce. Following that, we have our onions, our basil, our oregano, our garlic. You can salt and pepper this too if you want. I don't, but you can. And next we're going to put in, or put on, I'm sorry, the grated Parmesan cheese. Now about 3/4 of a cup or several handfuls, depending on, 3/4 of a cup is a good measure to go by, but grab a handful, sprinkle it on, see how it looks. If you don't like it, sprinkle more on. Mind you, can't take it off again, so keep that in mind. I suppose it could take it off, but just a nice coating. This is your sharper flavored cheese. This is what gives the cheese its cheesy flavor, its bite. This is an old aged cheese as opposed to mozzarella, which is a milder cheese. So we have our Parmesan, and then the mozzarella goes on there. Like I say, about 2 cups. This is good fresh mozzarella, which has decided to stick all its little shreds together, which is fun. Spread that over evenly. Don't worry about the height of this thing. Like I say, we're going to capture it. It can't go anywhere. Now, I would like to see more cheese in that, so I'm going to grate some more quickly if I can find it. There it is. There again, quantity, volume is up to you, depending on your taste, depending on how you like things flavored. There's a small dog poking around at my feet, waiting for me to drop something at this very moment. I don't think I should disappoint him. Little guy? Okay. That's the best way in the world to keep your floors clean. Okay, now this is where you can do whatever you want. Bacon bits, if you have them in the house, are great. If you don't want to fry up bacon, which takes time. I'm going to put the garlic sausage on that we've prepared. Like I say, you could put your green pepper on here, you could put your pineapple on here, but I don't want to know about it. You could put anything that you normally put on a pizza, anything that you don't normally find on a pizza because you're making this yourself, you can put it on if you want it. This one's just simply going to be a garlic, sausage, and mushroom pizza. Those are things that I can always count on having somewhere in my kitchen in some form. Okay, so we've got the garlic sausage. And now we're going to put on all these little mushroom stems in pieces. Fresh mushrooms, of course, are far superior to pizza, but you can't always have fresh mushrooms in the house. You can't always have fresh mushrooms growing on the manure pile out back, although I try. And 1 can works out just about right anyway. So that's all of the mushrooms. Okay, now we're going to get to the really exciting part. This pizza dough, which is the other half of what we started with here, is now really, really gooey. Okay. But yeast dough, after you've mixed it or kneaded it or anything, if you allow it to rest for 10 minutes, which of course we've done because we've ignored it, will roll out far easier. Remember that when you're, that's not flour. Remember that when you're doing anything with yeast dough that needs rolled out. If you're making cinnamon buns or you're making hamburger buns that you're going to cut, or you're making a yeast donut that you're going to cut, if you let your dough rest for 10 minutes, it rolls out far easier. Take some of the elasticity out of it. Makes it easier to work with. Just let it rest. Which I say, which is what we've done here by default. We went away and ignored it. Now you'll see this is fairly sticky, but that's okay. We controlled the stickiness in the bottom half with greasy fingers. We're going to control the stickiness in the top half with flour. So, shape it sort of round, pat it out as far as you can, flip it over again, keep a lot of flour on it. And then go over here and get your rolling pin and roll it out. Roll this way, just like rolling a pie crust when it's bread. Roll it big enough to fit over top. Now this is why we broke the dough exactly in half and kept the bigger half for the top, because the bigger half has to be bigger, or the top half has to be bigger, because it has to fold over and tuck under. So if your dough doesn't break exactly in half, make sure that the big half is what you save for the top. Now you're going to put this on the pizza, just like you'd put a pie crust on a pie. 18,962 times I've done this, this is never torn. There's always a first time. Just pull it off your counter, use lots of flour, no problem. Fold it in half, put your pizza there. Put it on just like you put a pie crust on. Flip it over. Now, pick this end up, pick that gooey end up that's on the pan and tuck it under there. So you've got a seal all the way around. And that holds the filling in there. So I say you can get really carried away and stack all kinds of stuff on this pizza if you want, because it's not going to go anywhere. It hasn't got a chance. Makes it a little awkward to eat. This tends to be a knife and fork pizza. That's fine too. And then of course that bottom crust, having been a little bit softer and controlled with shortening as opposed to soft and controlled with flour, is fairly sticky. So you're going to get a really good seal here by folding this under. See what I'm doing here? I'm picking this up and I'm grabbing this bottom one and I'm tucking it under. And kind of just roll it. Same principle as building a pie crust. Exactly. See if I can do it from this angle. No. Pull it up, tuck it under. And pull it up, tuck it under. All the way around. There. Now we have an enclosed pizza. Now I've never cut vents in this. I've never found it necessary like a pie to let steam out. I don't know. I've never had a pizza blow up yet either, so far so good. Okay, now we have kind of a plain looking thing there. So what we're going to do is, I use olive oil, of course, because I have it. If you don't have olive oil, what you can do is use any vegetable oil. But what you want is you want to put a little bit of vegetable oil on top of it. And if you've got any kind of couth at all, you'll probably get your pastry brush out and spread it around, but I don't. Just grab it before it flows onto the countertop. Spread it with your fingers. Now the reason we're putting olive oil on top, or vegetable oil, whatever you've got on top of this, is twofold. It will crisp up your top crust a little bit. And secondly, it will make the Parmesan cheese stick better. So take another handful of Parmesan cheese. We're probably looking at about 1/4 cup here. And sprinkle it all over the top. And then we're going to bake this in a 425-degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes, depending on when it looks brown and the way you like it. Okay, now this pizza, the beauty in this is you can do this at any speed you want. You can make your yeast dough, you can knead it, you can set it aside to rise. You can make your yeast dough, you can not knead it and set it aside to rise. Forget about it, go away, come back to it when you're ready. You can let it rise at this point. I wouldn't let it go too far, it'll get like this. I've done that before. But you can let it rise for 10 or 15 minutes if you're waiting for the family to come home or something and nobody's here and you don't want to put it in the oven yet. Just set it aside and ignore it for anywhere up to 20 minutes or so, and what it'll do is it'll get bigger, but it can still be baked at that point. So I'm going to go over the ingredients once more before we put it in the oven, because I don't know how coherent I was on that. We've got 1 1/4 cups of warm water, 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of sugar just to feed the yeasty beasties, tablespoon or 1 package of active dry yeast. Those are your crust ingredients to that point. Stir it. Let the yeasty beasties show they're alive. Wait for some foam. While you're doing that, go ahead and prepare some of the other stuff. Once you know your yeast is foaming, add 2 cups of flour and a teaspoon of salt. Beat that until it's smooth. You have to beat that until it's very smooth, and then measure out another 2 cups of flour, but put it in a little bit at a time. You don't want to get to the point where you've got it too dry and you can't work the rest of that flour in. So just work it until it comes away from the side of the bowl nicely and you feel comfortable with trying to work with that with your hands. Break it in half, put half of it in a well-greased pizza pan, spread it out, set the other half aside while you put in the filling. The filling is an 8-ounce can of regular tomato sauce, spread on the bottom. Then that thinly sliced onion went in there, but it doesn't have to. It can go anywhere closer to the top. It can go on top of the cheese if you want it there. Put in 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of basil, depending on your flavor preference. The same with the oregano, 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon. Garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon, depending on who you want to talk to and who you don't want to talk to the next day. Sprinkle of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon, 1/2 teaspoon, just something to take a little bit of the acidity out of the tomatoes. And then about 3/4 cup of Parmesan. Put the grated Parmesan on until you're comfortable with what you have there. and then as much mozzarella if you want. Throw some cheddar on there if you've got it in your refrigerator. Throw any kind of cheese that melts well on there if you've got it and you want it in there. Feta cheese is good. You can put that in there too if you happen to have it. Drain a can of mushrooms, put the mushroom stems and pieces on there if you want mushrooms on it. Slice a garlic sausage up, throw it on there. Pepper, whatever, pineapple, anything, anchovies if you got a can kicking around, whatever. And then roll out that second chunk of yeast dough so that it will fit over the top. Fold it in half, slide it on like a pie crust, roll it over the top, tuck it under, brush the top with oil, and then sprinkle on as much cheese as you feel you need. So we're going to put this in the oven now, the oven which I did remember to preheat to 425. And it's going to go in here for, like I say, 15 to 20 minutes. You're going to have to keep an eye on it. Have a look at it after 15 minutes. If you're really in a hurry, you can pump that oven temperature to 450 and it'll cook about 5 minutes faster. But whatever you do, put it in there, start checking it after about 15 minutes, 10 minutes if your oven's a little bit higher. And when you think it's brown enough, you take it out. And this time, I'm actually going to remember to set a timer, first for me. And I'm going to do some cleaning up while we wait for this pizza to bake. Okay, I have my plate, I have my pizza cutter, I have my counter back again. I have a timer that's going off. I smell pizza, so let's turn that off and see what's in the oven. That's just about right for doneness. The cheese is brown, the crust is brown, pizza's done. Okay, now you're going to get 8 good-sized pieces. I have the super-duper size pizza cutter because it's so much easier to work with, and I do make a lot of pizza. You can cut this with a knife, of course, but you'll get 8 good-sized pieces of pizza out of this pizza. This is a full meal for 4 people, no questions asked. So cut your pieces, make sure you've broken it up. If you've got the time and you want to let this sit for, maybe 5 minutes for the cheese to firm up inside just a little bit before you cut it, you can do that. Okay, now we'll see how well I cut it. I'm going to pull a piece out of there. Smells good. Let's pull a little piece out of there. Less chance of accident that way. Check to make sure your cuts are good. Now, this is going to be fairly gooey because it wasn't allowed to sit. So you got to be quick. Yank it up, pull it over. And then pick up all the little odds and ends that didn't come with it. Tuck them back in on the side there, just like that. And that is what I call pizza with a lid. My grandmother never did it that way, but I like it. So, if you want this recipe on a piece of paper so that you can read it and figure out what I lost you at or where you missed or any of those other alternatives, you can write to Kootenay Kitchen, RR1, Site 33, C28, Castlegar, BC, V1N, 3H7, and please send a self-addressed stamped envelope. We'll tuck this recipe into it for you and get it right off to you with the next mail. And before we go today, I'd like to thank Richard and the people down at Castlegar Super Value who again have sponsored us. And enjoy your pizza, and we'll see you next week.